We are a team of scientists and engineers, geologists and roboticists, professors and industry experts, coming together to build the tools needed to understand volcanic emissions and their effects on our world. Our goals are to build and test collaborative swarms of drones that are capable of sampling gases within active volcanoes, in places that are far too dangerous or remote for people to go. The team is highly collaborative, with investigators from multiple disciplines within science and engineering.
I'm Tobias Fischer.
My name is Matthew Frick.
John Erickson.
My name is Rafael Fierro.
My name is Scott Nowicki.
My name is Jared Sale.
I'm Melanie Moses, and I'm leading the VolCAN project. The VolCAN swarm will locate sources of CO2 emissions, follow the gradients created by volcanic plumes, and estimate the amounts of carbon dioxide and the ratio of emitted CO2 to other gases.
Over the next 4 years, we will be taking the VolCAN drone swarms from theory to field areas that represent the most significant sources of natural greenhouse gases, from the Valles Caldera in New Mexico to the craters of some of the most active volcanoes on the planet. This work will be a collaboration far beyond researchers at UNM and will involve the international research community as well as the people who live on the slopes of these volcanoes, where volcanic monitoring and prediction may be necessary to a continued way of life. Our best opportunity to test our methods came in late 2021, when a volcanic cinder cone began to erupt on the island of La Palma in the Canary Islands. The team packed up the fleet of drones and ran away to La Palma to work with VolCAN, the National Institute of Volcanology, responsible for the Canary Islands. When we arrived on the island, the eruption had entered a phase where ash rained down continuously over the nearby towns, and huge amounts of volcanic gases were being emitted at a number of vents. VolCAN had set up a monitoring station above the main vent. From this perspective, it was apparent that there was a lot of CO2 driving the eruption. But from above, we could only guess at how much CO2 was being emitted. We needed to get into the plume as it blew away from the cinder cone to be able to measure the total flux. Meanwhile, the landscape surrounding the eruption was absolutely devastated. The nearby homes that had not been destroyed during the earlier lava flows had to be abandoned under the relentless rain of cinders and ash. Of course, downwind of the vent is not a very hospitable environment for either people or drones. From the aerial view, we could make out at least 3 different sources of ash and steam. But since both CO2 and sulfur dioxide are invisible, the best we could do is follow the plumes that we could see and hunt for the CO2 plume. Designing the flight plan required guessing at where the gas would be as a function of weather and topographic conditions. We wouldn't know where the CO2 was until we reached it, so starting with a long transect with a single drone made the most sense. John designed automated flights that went first 1 kilometer and then 2 kilometers out into the densest ash and water plumes. The first flight dipped into the high CO2 zone, and the second flight fully captured the transect of the CO2 coming from the eruption. With this information in hand, we were ready to try to perform more complex flights and repeat these observations. By the end of the day, we felt like we had a handle on where the wind was taking the CO2. That night, everything about the eruption abruptly changed. Completely unpredicted, a massive pulse of gas-driven magma rose through the vents and was inundating the surrounding area with lava. Fire fountains were erupting from the vent on the backside of the cinder cone. From VolCAN's monitoring site, you could see how violent the eruption had become, creating a whole new set of threats to the nearby towns. With the change in character, we took to the skies to see how things had changed. The lava flows were absolutely spectacular, with bright, glowing rivers of lava working their way all the way down to the ocean. Our previous launch site and the houses adjacent were buried under fresh flows. While the scene up at the vents was certainly violent, The fluid lavas flowing gently through the landscape was beautiful to watch. Even with this new regime of eruption, we had a reasonable idea of where the CO2 would be, so we outfitted a drone with a bag capture system in order to obtain an in situ sample of CO2 for isotopic analysis. The results of these flights gave us, and in VolCAN, both an idea of the source of the magma and the magnitude of the overall CO2 flux from the eruption. Our last day on the Palma, we were able to get up close to the flowing lavas as it wound its way around trees and houses and flowed all the way to the Atlantic. This, of course, is not the end of the project, but rather just the next step in what might be possible for future volcanic events.